Obviously, government revenues are highly sensitive to oil price. As you know, in Nigeria, when oil price fell, government revenues fell dramatically. So we assume a $70 barrel of oil, that's Brent crude, and you know that that price has been substantially higher in recent weeks. It has now fallen below $70. So the numbers that I'm going to give you in the next few minutes all assume a $70 barrel of oil. They assume that the block will produce 560 million barrels of oil over a period of 13 years. And they assume a set of development and operating costs. All of the details of our base case analysis are contained in an annex to our report. That annex was shared with both Eni and Shell in advance of publication. They have contested the methodology, but they have not offered any alternative information on any of our input assumptions, not the fiscal terms and not the project economics either. So let me then turn to three sets of findings or three sets of results. The first one is simply, how much money can we expect the government of Nigeria to get over the life cycle of the project under these different scenarios? And the answer is that under 2003 terms or 2005 terms, or the terms that we assume will come out of the PIFB discussions, the government could expect to generate more than 14 billion US dollars from the block. Our analysis shows that the current terms, under the current terms, the government will generate less than 10 billion. So we are seeing a potential loss of at least 4.5 billion US dollars. The second way in which we can analyze the different fiscal terms is to look at a concept of government take. And this is just the percentage share that would go to the government compared to the companies after the costs of the block have been accounted for. Okay? It's a concept of government take. It's a percentage. And the IMF says that a mature producing country like Nigeria could expect between 65 and 85% government take. And when we look at the three sets of fiscal terms, 2005, 2003, 2018, we see that the government take ranges from between 60 and 65%. Is it on the low side? Yes, it is. Is it about what we would expect, knowing that the terms in deep water Nigeria have historically been quite generous? Yes, it's about what we would expect. The terms of the 2011 agreement and the 2012 PSA would generate for the government about 41%. So a far lower percentage than would come from any of the three other sets of fiscal terms. So let's talk briefly then about the potential revenue that's lost as a result of these fiscal terms. So our assessment is that the government of Nigeria, under our base case assumptions, loses at least 4.5 billion US dollars. That would be assuming that the 2003 fiscal terms would be in place. If it were the 2005 terms, which are more stringent, more favorable to the government, we assess that the government would lose around 5.8 billion US dollars. And you will see in the materials produced by the civil society organizations that they say almost 6 billion would have been lost, and that is where the number comes from. Finally, as I said in a previous part of my presentation, we believe that the economic assessment that we have produced is very conservative. We believe that the block will, in all likelihood, have more oil than we're assuming. We believe that the natural gas will have value that is not taken into account in our analysis, and therefore that the true economic value of the block is higher than we have characterized. I would also say that there's a reasonable chance, of course no one can predict, that oil price will be higher than $70 at some time in the future. And if oil price is higher, the share that the government loses grows. And under very high oil prices, it can grow very fast. So let me just say three things then in conclusion. First, the payment of $1.1 billion in 2011 was not only a payment to secure the rights to OPL 245. The payment also secured an extraordinarily set of fiscal terms, highly generous to the IOCs, highly detrimental to the government of Nigeria. The lack of profit oil in the current fiscal terms, that is profit oil to the government in the current fiscal terms that govern OPL 245, will result, our analysis shows, in a loss to the Nigerian people of at least 4.5 billion US dollars. Thank you.
As Don said, the analysis of the contract terms estimate that the changes that Shell and Eni secured to the terms that they received OPL 245 on in 2011 could reduce the Nigerian government's estimated future revenue from this block by nearly $6 billion over the lifetime of the project when compared to the previous set of terms that had applied before the 2011 deal, assuming $70 a barrel, and it's $4.5 billion in comparison to the earlier terms that Shell had in 2003. To put that in context, $6 billion is enough to pay for the federal health and education budgets combined twice over. This is real money to Nigerians, and it's massively in the public interest that Nigerians understand what is being done with their oil. Shell and Eni are already facing bribery charges over the OPL 245 deal in a landmark trial in Milan. Today's report shows that the companies altered the terms of their agreement in their favour. They removed Nigeria's profit oil, their share of their oil in this block, and kept those changes hidden in a contract that was not originally public. In our report published by Global Witness today, Take the Future, we report on Shell emails that we've reported on before, but show in a new light that the company's most senior managers understood that while they were calling the deal they were securing a production sharing contract, they understood that it contained no sharing of production with Nigeria, that their terminology was not accurate, and that the terms of this deal would be objected to were it to become public. 2 weeks before the deal was agreed in 2011, Nigeria's most senior civil servant in the Department of Petroleum Resources objected in strong terms, calling this deal highly prejudicial to the interests of the federal government. Nigerians should listen to those concerns now and should ask why those concerns were ignored or overruled. No company as large as Royal Dutch Shell or executives of such a male oil company have ever stood trial for bribery offences. Prosecution evidence began in Milan around a month ago. The companies have all pleaded not guilty. They face jail terms and potentially crippling fines if they were convicted. I should mention that the trial is continuing, and Eni, Shell, together with their senior managers, have all denied wrongdoing. Global Witness is calling on the Nigerian government to revoke the license so this estimated $6 billion loss can be stopped in its track. And we also believe that contracts and data around these contracts must be made public so that these kinds of deals cannot go unchecked anymore. Thank you.
I have heard I should clearly also state and unambiguously, like we have instituted and also established in our case on the same Malabu deal before a federal high court in Nigeria. We further also demand that this allocation should be revoked by the Nigerian government. Ab initio, it is an illegality beyond the fact that the Nigerian government also stated in the UK court under the trial through which Nigeria got about $73 million repatriated into Nigeria as part of some of the monies involved in that deal. Nigerian government, through the Office of the Attorney General, stated clearly before the court that this deal is actually surrounded by some elements of corruption and corrupt practices. And for that reason, we are also reiterating that position in court and also establishing that under the Code of Conduct for Public Office Holder, you cannot benefit from a process through which you superintend and also as a public office holder. Etete originally in 1998 benefited from a process where he actually superintended over that process and conspired with the son of late General Sonny Abacha to allocate and award the oil block to himself. That is complete illegality, and what the Constitution provides for, as at then and even as at now, is that the government will recover such an asset from whoever it is that benefited under that circumstances and forfeits him to the Nigerian government. And so with this new report, for us it is no longer news that Nigeria was actually exposed to enormous scandal by the deal for the OPL 245, orchestrated in 2011 by Eni and Shell, the two oil multinationals, with some high-profile Nigerian government officials. While litigation is ongoing in Milan in Italy against Shell and Eni over charges of bribery with respect to the deal, fresh facts are emerging on how the terms of the agreement were secretly altered to compromise future interests of Nigeria beyond the initial payment in favor of two multinationals, notwithstanding that the oil giants connived in the payment of $1.1 billion for the oil block in 2011, the officials also knew the payment would go into private coffers. There are emerging facts that Nigerian civil servants warned that the transaction was highly prejudicial to the interests of the federal government and the Federation of Nigeria. The OPL 245 oil block, which spans some 2,000 square kilometers and located on the southern edge of the Niger Delta, in excess of water depth of 1,200 meters, is arguably one of the worst of Nigeria's questionable oil concessions, with profile of huge revenue losses. Investigations have since revealed negotiations leading to the contract violated established procurement process in Nigeria and also negated international standard of business transactions. Since the lid was blown off the deal, which gave the subsidiaries of Eni and Shell equal shares of the oil deal to the disadvantage of Nigeria, this was a situation that it was just shared between Eni and Shell without any consideration for Nigeria as the original ownership of, with the original ownership of the natural resources. There have been accusations and counter-accusations between the Nigerian officials and multinational oil companies. High-profile Nigerians indicted related to the case include immediate past Attorney General and Minister of Justice, Mr. Mohammed Adoke. The crux of the concern elicited by the controversial deal derives from the process of awarding the license to Eni and Shell. The multinationals included clauses depriving the Nigerian state of its rightful share of oil production, and the implication incur monumental losses in revenues that ought to accrue to the coffers of the country. At the expense of Nigeria, the notorious deal gave the oil company multinationals the bulk of project revenues, while Nigeria is left with a share that falls far short of that recommended by the International Monetary Fund for oil-producing countries. It is estimated that with oil prices in the region of $70 per barrel, potential government revenues that were negotiated away could amount to $5.86 billion. The actual amount Nigeria stands to lose is almost certainly greater than these estimates. Company documents show that there is more oil in Block 245 than the 560 million barrels assumed in the revenue analysis. So as much as we thank Don, we're not entirely that happy that he's been extremely conservative in estimating the cost. But thank you also for bringing this to the public. Furthermore, the analysis includes the cost that would be incurred, but not the revenue that will be generated from unspecified volumes of natural gas. Emerging information from the analysis reveal considering additional exploration prospects and the anticipated contribution of natural gas sales, the actual economic benefit from the OPL 245 could be considerably higher than what was captured in the agreement and also in Don's analysis. Largely, the new information on OPL 245, based on the post-evaluation analysis by Resource for Development Consulting, further shows that the physical terms that emerged from the resolution agreement of 2011 and the PSA signed between Eni and Shell in 2012 are not consistent. There is therefore the need for the Nigerian government to diligently pursue ongoing litigation, both in Nigeria and in Italy, including taking the necessary steps to extradite indicted individuals to enhance the prosecution of the cases arising from the OPL 245 scam and ultimately to cancel this scandalous deal. We thank you all for listening.